can everybody hear me? Sort of, okay. I got like 5 mic packs in my suit I'm trying to deal with here. Okay, thank you everyone for being here. As many of you in the front couple rows here I've debated with over the last 2 days of how exactly I want to deliver this talk. If you've had me in class, you know that I like to, as one student put it, roam and ramble. I like to go and go side to side. But there's some real things I want to say today, some things I want to make sure I say correctly, and some people I want to make sure I honor. So I'm going to try and stay right behind here for as long as I can. We'll see how long that goes. But before I do that, I want to start with a few thank yous. So thank you to Heidi, to Brian, to Dean Ginsburg for their work in this nomination. It's been truly an honor to go through this process. Thank you to my former students, Olivia Stevenson and Chris Watkins, for writing the letters of support for this award. You'll see a lot of special guests here in the front row. A lot of my family, as you know, has been here for the last 11 years as we've been here in Lawrence. And it's amazing to see them here. For many of them, this is the first time they've seen me teach. You can see my kids. I wouldn't tell them what this was about, so they're still debating if they're happy to be here, if they should have went to practice instead, what they're in for, how long it is. So we're going to find out together. My wonderful wife, Robin, we've been married 17 years. We were on the same college tennis team when we were 18 years old. We got engaged when we were 19. We were married when we were 21. She believed in me when there wasn't a lot to believe in, and has followed me throughout this whole process, and it's amazing to have her here today. My mom is here, and if you're curious who that is, just find the person that has the very inconspicuous mother lapel pin across her over here. The first time she ever came to see me teach, she's like, I'd really like to come watch you teach, and I'd been teaching for a couple years. So I said, yes, that's fine. Mom, she said, I won't get in the way, won't even know I'm there. And she walks into the classroom, and giant, first thing you see, giant mother lapel pin. My mom was a single mom. She started her own business and showed me really early on, what hard work looked like. And I'm stoked to have her here today for this speech. See, I'm already getting off script here. Hold on, I get it back where I'm going. I get to mention, my son and daughter are also here. Julian's a 7th grader. Julian, raise your hand around. Yay. Charlotte's a 4th grader. Charlotte, raise your hand around. Yay. One of the real perks of this job is I get to spend a lot of time with them. And I get to be at their activities and get to see them grow. And so this is the first time both of them get to see me teach. And so it's a special day for that as well. I'm also very lucky to have a lot of other special guests here in the front row. My in-laws are here who've been here in Lawrence and been a big part of our life, and it's great to have them here. And some other special guests that you're going to get to hear more about if I can even get to the main part of this speech without getting too emotional. And a few last thank yous to our other department chairs. This job's hard. It's not very much fun, but what helps and what helps me get through it is our other department chairs in the school. That group has been a group that I've leaned on. Dave, Heidi, Jennifer, and Jenny. It's been a group that I've leaned on heavily throughout the last 3 years as chair. And this group is a group that I really rely on to keep me grounded, to tell me, yes, that was crazy, no, you were crazy, yes, we should do that, no, you shouldn't do that. And without them, this job would be impossible. So it's great that you're here. And my friends from KU Athletics, thank you for what you do for our program, what you do for our students, what you do for me. It's an honor to have you all here. And I know you all are quite busy. College athletics is pretty boring right now, but I appreciate that you can make it over and be with us. To my non-KU friends who are like, what are you doing up here? They have no idea what I do for a job, who have no idea what I do in a classroom. I'm excited to have you all here. I'm excited for you to see this, or for us to see me at least kind of in my element. And I can't wait to hear your feedback later over a few beverages probably. And lastly, to my current and former students that are here, it's an honor to have you here. It's an honor to teach you. It's an honor to have you as Jayhawks, and I can't thank you enough for being here. So let's try and get started. All right. I'm incredibly honored to follow in the footsteps of previous Budig teaching professors. Many of them are here today. Previous lectures have focused on a wide variety of topics, from teaching strategies to research innovations to the future of education. When I was debating the type of talk I wanted to give, I kept coming back to just how grateful I was to be here, how grateful I was to have the opportunity to give a keynote at this university, the University of Kansas. If you know me, you probably know this story. I grew up wanting to be a Jayhawk. If you wanted to leave right now, and if you're in pretty good shape, you could jog to my grandparents' house and back before I finished this speech. When I would have breaks over Christmas, over different holidays, I would come here and I'd go shoot hoops on campus and dream of being in crimson and blue. So just to have a faculty job here was surreal. I'll never forget when I got an offer to be here, when I accepted an offer to be here, all those milestones, all those moments in my life. So to just have that faculty job was surreal. But now to hold the same HSCS department chair position as James Naismith and Fogg Allen is something I could have never imagined. And so when I kept thinking, what should I talk about? What do I want to talk about? What do I want to use this time for? I kept coming back to this idea of being grateful and gratefulness. And so what I'd like to do today is to both honor those who helped me get to this place, and then also hopefully pass on some of the lessons that they passed on to me that I hope our students learn from us in our program. I also believe this talk comes at an appropriate time for where we currently sit in education. Being a teacher, a coach, working in higher education is getting increasingly, let's call it, complicated. Many of us got in this field to teach, to help, to make an impact. I know that's why I did. Now our days are filled with things that pull us away from that initial mission. Dozens of things that have nothing to do with why we got into this profession. Accreditation, AI, mandates, whatever it is, it's not why I got here, but it's what I deal with on a daily basis. But what I hope we can ultimately take away from this is that teachers, coaches, and educators still matter. That what we do still matters. That we can and should impact lives, that we can and should make meaningful connections with our students, and that as frustrated or defeated as we may feel, we owe it to those that helped us to help others. So in this talk, I have two goals. First, I aim to highlight some of the key tenets of my teaching and leadership philosophy that I learned from truly amazing mentors, coaches, and educators, many of them that I am thrilled to have here today. Second, this is likely the only time in my career I'm going to have an opportunity in a platform like this, a platform that I can use to thank those that helped me get here, to honor them, to tell them how much they mean to me. As the great Jim Valvano said, if you laugh, you think, and you cry, that's a full day. That's a heck of a day. Hopefully you'll laugh and think a bit. I know I'm going to cry, so please bear with me. All right, let's get to it. I want to start with a story taken from legendary Nebraska football coach Tom Osborne. If you heard I grew up in Southwest Nebraska. If you grew up where I did, everybody idolized Tom Osborne. But as I got older, I became increasingly enamored with his beliefs and philosophies on leadership and mentoring. And there's one particular activity his former players consistently referenced that changed the way they looked at their actions, their goals, and their ambitions. And I do this activity with my students every semester. And in fact, my master's students are about to do it next week. So what I want you to do, in your head, I want you to answer this question. If you could trade places with one person in the world, who would it be and why? Just think about this question for a few seconds. If you could trade places with any person in the world, who would it be and why? And then normally I go around the room and I call on students and they tell me who they like. Today, Dean Ginsburg, you get to answer, mainly because I'm fascinated with who you're going to pick.
Jordan? No. I'll be honest, I was thinking Donald Trump and I would act normally.
So normally when we do this, we don't get a political answer because they're 18 years old. So the type of answers I get from 18 to 25-year-olds, they're interesting. You can imagine. Their names like LeBron James, Taylor Swift. Cheryl, that's probably who you picked, right? No. Bobby Witt, Jeff Bezos, people I don't even know. I don't even understand. I don't know who they are. I think they're real people. Maybe they're not. I don't know. But when I ask why that person, you can imagine what they say. They talk about wanting the money, the fame, the freedom, being famous, other things that I probably shouldn't repeat here, right? That they would like if they would trade places with that person. And so we all have a good laugh, and it's fun, and then we move on. And then later in the class, I ask them this question. Who is the person that you respect the most in the world? And I want you to think about this one for a second as well. Who is the person that you respect the most in this world? I don't have my students answer this out loud. I did the first year, but I found out very quickly these answers were pretty personal. I'm always amazed by what they write down. It's almost never someone that is famous or well-known. Instead, it's a person who has greatly impacted their life, someone that has sacrificed for them to be sitting in that classroom, someone that showed them the way, someone that pushed and pulled them through these tough times. A parent, a friend, a grandparent, a coach, a sibling, a community leader. I hear descriptors like hero and idol. It's very, very powerful. I get to read about all these amazing people that have helped our students get to where they are now. oftentimes unknowingly. The point that Coach Osborne makes to his players, and the question I pose to our students, is if that is the person that you respect the most in the world, then why did you want to trade places with the famous person? One of his former players recalled Coach Osborne asking the team, this is a direct quote, are you trying to be like the person you respect the most in the world, or are you trying to be like the person you envy? Are you trying to be like the person that sacrificed for you, or are you trying to be like the person who has a little bit more than you? He ended by saying, we need to spend more time being like your mother, your father, your mentor. The reason you respect them is they will do anything for you. When I read this for the first time, it was powerful to me. It changed how I viewed my career, how I viewed my ambitions, how I viewed the type of people that I wanted to follow and that I wanted to be around. Instead of trying to chase these famous professors that I saw at conferences that had these publications or grants or big jobs, I instead tried to emulate the people in my life that I respected, the people who led a life that I desired to lead. Of any lesson or activity I teach, this is the one I get the most positive feedback on from students. In the social media era world we live in, our students are constantly comparing themselves to others and reminded of the things they don't have and the things they haven't accomplished. While they see everyone posting about their successes, it can feel like they are behind or not enough. As educators, we should do what we can to try and create a realistic North Star for our students by helping them to identify the things they truly care about and aspire to be. In my experience, the correlation between job title and happiness is minimal at best, especially for many of our students who are trying to break into an incredibly difficult sports world. My success stories as an educator aren't always those that are athletic directors or head coaches. Instead, it is those students we help find the type of person they want to be in the life they want to lead. Those that emulate the people in the life that they respect and avoid the pitfalls of comparison and clout chasing. If we can do that, we will set our students up for success not only after they graduate, but as they become leaders in their own field. Now, the first couple times I did this activity, I didn't tell my students my answers. Maybe I wasn't comfortable doing it, but honestly, they probably didn't ask. I wasn't that interesting. But eventually a student did ask, so who's the person you respect the most in this world? Who is your hero, your idol? No way I'm getting through this, by the way. And I'm fortunate that for the first time, the answer that I always tell them is the person in this room, my older brother, Jason. I tell my students that my brother also works at KU, is much more important than me at the university, but he works in finance, so I'm probably more popular currently. And the thing that I respect the most about him is that he didn't have to be so involved in my life. In fact, it was actually much harder for him to be than it wouldn't have been. Because as I make sure to remind him regularly, Jason's 19 years older than I am. And technically, he's my half-brother. But I've never heard him use that qualifier or treat me as such. He's the person that showed me that I could be a father even if I didn't have one around. Showed me that I could still be a father and an involved father and have a career, because he was. He's the person I go to when I'm feeling I'm not good enough and I need a boost of confidence, as I did multiple times this week. And also the person that I know will be honest with me and tell me their answer that's honest, even if I'm absolutely going to hate it. So I'm lucky. I'm lucky that I have that person in my life. But many of our students aren't that lucky. They don't have somebody in their family or their support group that can help them that way. But we as educators, as teachers, we have the unique opportunity to serve that role for those that aren't as lucky, to guide, to impact, to make a difference, and to be very ambitious to change a life. Because when I read those responses from our students, I'm amazed at those, and I'll ask our students, have you told this person that? Have you told them how they impacted you? And largely they haven't. Many times it's a teacher that believed in them when they were younger, a sibling, a parent that guided them when they were younger. And so we have this incredible opportunity to do this for our students. All right, I made it through that one. We're going to keep going. Okay, and there's my brother. So if you ever taken a class of mine, you can probably recite this next lesson. I'm big on relationships and relationship building. The crux of my lecture to the class each semester is I believe that the easier it has become to talk to each other, the worse we've actually gotten at it. The easier it has become to talk to each other, we've actually gotten worse at it. And I don't mean like talking to each other, I mean like talking to each other like this. Not snapping, not texting, whatever. So I just tried to sound cool by saying snapping, right? Using words out loud, talking to people. If you ask my students some of the hardest things I make them do in class, many would tell you that forcing them to talk, actually in person or on the phone, to someone they don't know is at the top of that list. In my experience, by the way, us adults aren't all that good at it anymore either. One way we can get better at this, to build genuine relationships is to stop waiting for when it is convenient and instead invest in people that can help us. People that need our help, our guidance, even just our acknowledgement with no expectation of paying you back. As my students hear me say over and over, the first time that someone hears from you can't be when you need something. When I get in the car, much to my kids' annoyance, I usually try to find someone I haven't talked to lately just to check in. No agenda, no ask for anything, just a simple how are things. Encouraging our students to develop relationship building habits is difficult but important. In the digital world, networking is incredibly robotic. We all get the cold LinkedIn messages, the cold emails, and they're so very easy to ignore. When I taught a large introduction to sport management class with over 300 students, I would hold casual Friday meetings. Students could sign up for 15-minute time blocks to come to my office and talk about anything not related to class. There was no extra credit, no benefit to their grade, and it wasn't required. But in those 15 minutes, I often learned more about them than I did throughout the rest of the semester. I found out about who they truly were. And as an added benefit, I forced them to, talk to someone they didn't know, someone that was intimidating, right? Someone that they should take initiative with and take time to meet their professor. So at least at the end of their freshman year, they'd develop at least one relationship with a professor or somebody on campus. And at least a dozen times, I've referenced things I learned about students from those meetings in reference letters or calls when they apply for internships and jobs years later. For me personally, my first relationship I developed with a faculty member at KU occurred over 10 years ago when I actually first interviewed here in a setting much like this, and it was actually with someone who happens to be here today. When I interviewed at KU, I had only taught a class of 20 students before. I may not have told the search committee that, sorry. But on my agenda was a teaching presentation to a large undergraduate class. I didn't want to ask what that meant because, again, I told them I taught big classes, so no big deal. I could talk about whatever I wanted, but I didn't know how many students there were, plus the search committee was going to be in the classroom. I was a bit nervous, but figured, hey, I've done this before. I'll be fine. But I wasn't. When I walked outside the classroom and I looked in the window over in good old Robinson Center, any confidence I may have had pretty quickly went away. It was like it was straight out of a teaching nightmare. There were 100 desks, mostly full with students who looked like the smartest and meanest kids I'd ever seen. There was this elevated stage, if you remember Robinson, in front of the classroom. And it looked like it was going to be maybe the worst hour of my life. I felt like I was going to be in the brightest spotlight imaginable. In my head, all I could think of is every and every stutter and every word that I said wrong was going to be blasted to however many people were out there. To me, it looked like thousands. And to top it all off, by the way, when I looked into the classroom, the person that teaching before me was KU royalty. Dr. Scott Scooter Ward, who's sitting here today in the front row. Any KU sports fan knew about Scooter. He was the esteemed academic advisor and sports psychologist who was mentioned in every story and every senior speech about the impact he had on thousands of people. I was supposed to follow him? Oof. The next few minutes before I actually had to give a lecture are a blur besides one moment. After his class was finished, I stumbled into the room in a scared haze, and at some point, someone introduced me to Scooter. We chatted for a second, I think. I don't have a clue what I said, but I must have looked absolutely terrified to teach. And I say that I must have absolutely terrified because Scooter shook my hand, said good luck, and then he pulled me in close. And he said, hey, look out there at all those students. So I did. Scott Ward told me to do something, so I did it. And he said, look out there at all those students. They're all full of it. And he let out a huge laugh. Except for he didn't say it, by the way. In the moment, I can't overstate how much that meant to me, how much that calmed me down, how much that is what I needed, how much a simple joke from a person I had never met before, showing compassion, changed the trajectory of the next 45 minutes. I truly don't know how I would have made it through that presentation without that tiny moment. One gesture that changed my life from a person who had no idea if he'd ever see me again. He could have said hi, went back to his office and said, hey, guys, you should have seen this terrified kid I saw before this class. But he didn't. And because of that, I'm here today. Over the past 10 years, I've been incredibly blessed to call Scooter a dear friend, to thank him, tell him I love him. And now the coolest thing of all is I get to watch him help my two kids navigate their own journey as athletes. So thank you, Scoot. We have this incredible opportunity to develop relationships with our students. But moreover, we have this opportunity to help them learn how to develop relationships with each other and with their mentors. I talk to my students about this concept of a political skill, the idea that acting in our own self-interest doesn't have to be mutually exclusive from helping others. The idea that small moments matter, oftentimes more than big moments you build up and prepare for. The idea that a word of encouragement you give to a student as they leave the room, the quick piece of feedback on an email or resume, or the interest you show in their extracurricular activity, or the quick call you make on their behalf is more important than all the other things we may do in a classroom. These small moments can change the course of a student's month, their day, their academic career, or sometimes their life. The times that I thought I made the most impact are not always what students cite they remembered about our relationship. We don't know when we're going to help someone. We don't know when they need help. We should operate with that in mind. We need to stop viewing relationships as a series of transactions or big moments, and instead realize that our impact often comes when we don't know that we're helping someone. The third lesson I'd like to discuss today is about honesty and accountability. But I don't want to talk about teaching our students to be honest and accountable. That's a given, I think. Instead, I believe we owe it to our students to be honest with them and hold them accountable, even when it feels uncomfortable or difficult to do so. The thing I struggle with most as a beginning educator is having those hard conversations with students. Those conversations where you have to tell someone what they did simply wasn't good enough. That they don't deserve that dream internship just because they applied. That yes, it does matter if you turn your assignments in on time. It was much easier for me to always tell students what they wanted to hear. Sure, take an extension. Yeah, definitely you can be the Dallas Cowboys GM if you try hard enough. In my mind, that was the compassionate thing to do. That's what we should be doing. But I slowly started to realize I wasn't serving anyone but myself by doing that. In my mind, I realized what I was doing was just kind of chickening out. I wasn't doing my job as an educator. If I really wanted to serve students, I should do so by pushing them, by holding them accountable, and setting expectations in a lower stakes environment like a classroom, so they weren't encountering adversity for the first time in a workplace. After a few years, I think I got better at this. But I still didn't think I was having more success with my students. My new mantra, my new role, whatever I wanted to call it, wasn't as effective as I thought it would be. I thought I solved it, but I hadn't. It wasn't until I reflected on why I persevered through my own education, particularly my doctoral degree, that I realized I was missing an additional, actually much more important step. I completed my doctoral degree at Florida State University. When I visited FSU, I instantly knew it was where I wanted to be. It was warm. If you looked outside today, it was sunny. This awesome third-year doctoral student, Brian Gordon, showed me around in an awesome bright orange Mustang. Julian, Uncle Brian used to be cool. You know. The program chair, an esteemed researcher, was going to be my advisor, and I couldn't have been more excited. But once I arrived, it was a different story. Brian was still there, thankfully, and candidly the main reason I survived that first year. And honestly, with accountability, and honesty and accountability certainly weren't the problem in our doc program. We got a lot of that. Within my first 2 months, my advisor was changed. My graduate assistant position was shifted from what I thought was going to be teaching to overseeing 40 very unmotivated master's students that were teaching activities classes. And the type of research I completed was dictated by my advisor, who was desperately trying to get tenure. To say it wasn't what I dreamed of would be an understatement. I watched over half my cohort leave, and in fact, 3 of 10 of us finished, or fail out in the first 2 years, and I was pretty sure I was headed in that same direction. But that fall, the department hired a new faculty member that I instantly gravitated toward. His research was interesting and impactful. He actually took an interest in these students, and he invited us to our family. I eventually convinced that person, Josh Newman, to be my advisor, and I'm incredibly honored to have him here today. And in fact, he sent me this picture of me and his son, Reese, playing soccer in what is the Florida State version of Robinson. And now Reese is a nationally ranked youth soccer player, which means we're old. But Josh can attest it wasn't always smooth sailing between us. As I approached the end of the third year of my program, Josh is first as my advisor. I thought I was ready to graduate. Rob and I were about to have our first child. I had a publication or 2, maybe, I think, and was content to go on the job market with the goal of landing at a major R1 institution like this. I still vividly remember Josh telling me that wasn't likely or maybe even reasonable with my CV. If I really wanted that, I needed to stay another year at FSU. It was absolutely the last thing I wanted to hear. I was devastated, I was angry, but I trusted him enough to heed his advice. As I look back on that time, I realized that yes, He was honest, and he held me accountable. But if he had just stopped there, I wouldn't have ended up here. I wouldn't have had the CV to here. I wouldn't have even probably got an interview here. It was another step that he took that got me here, that set me to work at my dream school immediately after graduation. Josh was honest, but then he was helpful. After reflecting back, it occurred to me that yes, I had gotten more comfortable being honest and holding students accountable, but I wasn't yet willing to put in the work to help them reach their goals and aspirations that I had just told them weren't realistic. So basically, I was really good at identifying problems, not solving them. I wasn't willing to do what Josh had done for me. He wrote papers with me and let me be the lead author, helped me through a very overly ambitious dissertation project, guided me through the job search process, and was the person I called before every on-campus interview. The night before I interviewed at KU, I was sitting at the Eldridge Motel, which I just told me was haunted, when Josh asked me, hey, what are you going to say when they ask you how much you want for startup? And I said, what is startup? And as it happened, the first question I got asked when I interviewed the next day was, how much do you need for startup? As educators, we aren't going to be able to help every time. But when our skills, our connections, our experiences, whatever it may be, can be helpful, we should use them. Honesty and accountability aren't near as effective if we aren't willing to help fill in the gaps. Once I realized this, these tough conversations, while still hard, became a bit easier. By being honest and then helpful, we can help students identify areas where they can improve while also giving them the tools to better their professional and personal ambitions. As former NFL coach Bill Parcells wrote in the article, The Tough Work of Turning Around a Team, you have to be honest with people, brutally honest. You have to tell them the truth about their performance, you have to tell it to them face to face, and you have to tell it to them over and over again. Sometimes the truth will be painful, and sometimes saying it will lead to an uncomfortable confrontation. He finished with, in the end, I've found people like the direct approach. It's much more valuable to them to have a leader who's absolutely clear and open with them than someone who talks in circles. I've had many players come back to me 10 years later and thank me for putting pressure on them. They say what they remember the most about me is one line, I think you're better than you think you are. That last line has always stuck with me. I think you're better than you think you are. I think that describes a relationship I have with many of our students who have imposter syndrome, who come in and think, who am I to be this person? Who am I to work at this place? Who am I to work for this organization? It sums up that I think what limits their students the most. And what I think as educators, we can do such a better job at encouraging students to push those boundaries, to push those hard lessons and really learn from them. This leads into my last lesson. I promise, Charlotte, I'm almost done. One that was taught to me in a high school journalism classroom by the best educator I've ever known. But first, I want to tell you a little bit how I found my way into that classroom. So see, and kids, cover your ears for this. I wasn't exactly a great student in elementary school, or middle school, or junior high, or the first year of high school. You could contribute this to a lot of things. I was unorganized and lazy and stubborn, probably thought I was too smart for the teachers and classes I was in, and often spent more time talking myself out of schoolwork than doing the actual schoolwork. I have vivid memories of my middle school math teacher telling my mom during a parent-teacher conference that I made her tired. So as I entered high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. My identity was as an athlete, and I already had a good enough ACT score for the state school, so why did I need to apply myself in school anyway? But during my freshman year, I took a photography class, because as you can guess, I thought, that looks pretty easy. And to be candid, I can't remember a thing I did in that course. I'm not sure if I picked up a camera or went in the darkroom. But what did happen is I was immediately drawn to the teacher of that course. I looked for other courses I could take with her and learned she was also the head of the journalism program and advisor of the Stampede, the prestigious student newspaper. I went to the first newspaper staff meeting and I was blown away. The room was full of passionate and talented people. You'll see some of them on the screen here. From all different social groups and all different years in school. Athletes, non-athletes, theater, all the groups had all representatives on this newspaper staff, and they openly debated ideas and they challenged each other. It was unlike anything I had ever seen in a classroom. I didn't know you could do that. And always at the front of the classroom was my esteemed advisor, Linda Crandall, who I'm thrilled is here today. I would have done whatever it took to be on that newspaper staff because I wanted to be around that environment she created. An environment of excellence, where we won 6 straight and 7 of 8 journalism state championships. The small school in southwest Nebraska, often scoring double the points of large schools from Lincoln and Omaha at state competition. It was so incredibly rare to have a teacher with Linda's combination of talent, compassion, and care in a school like ours. All of a sudden, I wanted to do well in school because she wanted me to do well in school, so I could be the sports editor and eventually the editor-in-chief of the paper. And it isn't an accident that this photo up here includes a disproportionate number of people from our school that have gone on to successful careers in education, including a VP of Student Affairs and director of an academic institute. The reason I first walked into that class, because I thought, hey, this is going to be easy, is the exact opposite reason I never wanted to leave. Publishing a student newspaper was hard. It took coming back to the classroom after our sports practices were done, working until midnight or later to edit, refine, and design the paper for that week, and it taught all of us to handle hard better. A lesser educator, a lesser advisor, would have just done the last edits herself, left the school at a reasonable hour, and we all would have went on with our lives not knowing any different. Instead, Linda let us struggle. She let us learn. She let us argue and debate. She let us do hard things. The fiercest debates I ever had with the teacher were with Linda. The story I won the top prize for in state for my junior year came after hours and hours of arguments about if I should even write it. In short, our school was one of the first to do those fake tragedy events you probably all heard about or seen by now, where they call an emergency meeting, you come in, they tell you your classmates were dead from something terrible, and then they bring them out on stage once everyone is appropriately upset to scare you into not ever doing that terrible thing. I believe my initial editorial called for every administrator involved to resign. I was emotional, I was angry, and I was out to get somebody. Linda and I argued for hours, but she never once told me I shouldn't or couldn't write about the event. Instead, she got me to see that it would be much more powerful to write about why I was angry, to do the hard work of expressing my feelings, of confronting those feelings and telling people the negative impact programs like these can have on young people. She taught me to handle hard better, not to run from it or be reactive. To this day, it's still one of the written pieces that I'm the most proud of. I could tell a dozen stories. We could stay here all day about what Linda taught me and the lessons I still lean on today, stories that are so vivid in my memory that it's like they happened yesterday. But I'm going to limit myself to just one more. As I mentioned, Linda was objectively the best journalism educator in the state of Nebraska, in our mind, in the world. But because of that, we believed we were the best. And if you know anything about student journalists, especially one on a staff that just won 6 straight state championships, you know we might have had an inflated view of our importance. So one day during school, our staff got word that the advisor of a student group was complaining that we didn't cover their achievements enough, and we're going to tell our advertisers. As you can guess, we were offended, we were outraged, we were livid. How dare you criticize the Stampede? We sprung into action, and we printed off every article we had ever written about that group over the past year, grabbed our last 2 state championship plaques for good measure, and we were ready to storm out of that door and go get that teacher. As we hit the door, we heard Linda's voice saying, "Stop." And I can see it like it happened yesterday. I'll never forget looking back, fully expecting her to tell us, "Let's calm down, let's get back into the classroom." Instead, she reached out her hand with a piece of paper and she said, "You missed one." Now you can imagine what happened next. The teacher didn't enjoy our theatrics as much as we did. I think before we got back to the classroom, the principal was there in our classroom for a very strong scolding. And I'm sure Linda got a visit to her office we will never hear about. But to us, it only cemented the fact that she was in our corner. We would have ran through a wall for her because she would do the same for us. Many, many times I've wanted to be risk averse when a student comes with me an idea that is non-traditional or an idea that might fail. When they want to try something hard or something they believe in, but that has risk. My initial reaction, I think like many of us, is no. We don't need to take risk. Why would we do this? But I keep having that voice from Linda in my head. The best example of this came during my first year as a sport management program director. A doctoral student of mine teaching a sport ethics class sent me an email on a Friday afternoon that she had invited the star and very, very foul-mouthed coach from the hugely popular Netflix series Last Chance U, if you guys have seen that, to her class on Monday in 48 hours. Oh, and Netflix was going to bring their film crew, as you can see here. You can imagine my initial reaction. Absolutely not. Belinda's voice and lessons were in my head. And instead of shutting it down, I helped her get the necessary approvals, didn't sleep all weekend from being so nervous of what the coach would say, and let the instructor ask the questions for the interview in front of the class. And it all went fine, I guess. The coach was appropriate enough and insightful. The students asked great questions, and Dean Ginsburg even showed up and didn't fire me after. I tell this story because too often my solution for students, and for myself when we face hard things is to try and remove the adversity from our life as quickly as possible. But I've slowly discovered that life never really gets easier. I used to think as soon as I passed my comprehensive exam, or finished my dissertation, or got a job, or got tenure, or got full professor, or finished this keynote, that all that stress and pressure I feel will wash away. But it never does. Instead, I've just gotten better at handling hard things, at trusting myself in my judgment, at asking for help, at trusting that bad times are fleeting. But in my experience, the majority of my current students don't have that trust in themselves yet. They didn't have someone like Linda in their corner. When I first started teaching, I had maybe 1 or 2 students this semester tell me about mental health concerns. Now I average 1 a week. I think we all do. As educators, it's now more important than ever to help students handle hard better. As much as we want to, we can't shield them from the difficult things they'll need to do to be successful. In Do Hard Things, Steve Magnus writes, real toughness is experienced discomfort or stress, leaning in, paying attention, and creating a space to take thoughtful action. Toughness is navigating discomfort to make the best decision that you can. I'll end with this. By supporting me, believing in me, and teaching me to do hard things, Linda helped me get to where I am today. I'm not here without her. At this university, with a few extra initials behind my name, with an opportunity to give a talk like this one to my colleagues, my family, and my closest friends. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and rock job.